Now, you might have heard about U.S. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen's visit to Beijing recently, and it's crucial to understand some important truths. Let me break it down for you in a way that's easy to grasp. So think of the United States as the biggest consumer in the world and China as the largest producer. We buy a lot and they make a lot. It's that simple. Now, the thing is, the United States depends on China to finance its deficits. We basically borrow money from them to keep our economy going. And on the other hand, China relies on the U.S. capital markets to invest and park its savings. This relationship has been going on for over 3 decades, and it has brought significant benefits to both countries. The U.S. enjoyed robust economic growth, and China flourished with prosperity. But here's the catch. This cozy setup is now at risk. The US has less than 5% of the world's population, but we consume almost 20% of the world's yearly output. And that's a lot. And because of that, we also owe a massive 10% of the world's total debt. It's like living beyond our means on a grand scale. Now let's look at China. With around 18.5% of the world's population, they produce just a little over 18.5% of the world's GDP. China has been consuming less than it produces, which means it ends up having large trade surpluses. Their government has planned things carefully. They've got economies of scale, strong infrastructure, and they focus on consumer-driven innovation. That's why China has become such a vital part of the global supply chain. But you know, things haven't always been smooth between China and the United States. It all started with the Obama administration's pivot to Asia, and since then, the relationship has been on a decline. The reason behind this is that the US got worried about China's economic growth, thinking it could challenge America's dominance in the world. Now, the US has this idea that it's entitled to lead the world with the combination of liberal democratic capitalism. They believe it's the only way to keep this world in check and prevent major conflicts like the world wars. Without the idea of American exceptionalism, there wouldn't have been a justification for all these wars. Political interference, treaty breaking, and unilateral actions that Washington has engaged in over the years, disregarding international institutions and laws. It's crucial to understand how things began with misaligned hopes on both sides. Now, Washington had hoped for regime changes in China, while China hoped for peaceful economic rejuvenation. But sadly, these aspirations have now turned into a deep ideological conflict where Washington is repeating big lies as part of a long con. And amidst all this, Beijing still hoped that Secretary Yellen would address issues like tariffs, investment restrictions, blacklists, and de-dollarization. But her speech at Johns Hopkins in April and her tweets upon arriving in China dashed those hopes. She continued to emphasize security over economics, and with the US seeking healthy competition but being ready to take action to protect national security when needed. Now, it's tough to stay positive when you're facing challenging situations, but just talking about it won't change a thing. I learned this from personal experiences, especially when I heard Yellen making hypocritical statements about subsidies and unfair treatments in China, while ourselves are guilty of massive tech subsidies and blacklisting of Chinese firms and individuals. Now, the issue between the US and China goes deeper than that. It's about Washington's self-centered desire to maintain power no matter the consequences. Take, for example, the unilateral tariffs that were continued by Biden, hurting American consumers more than Chinese businesses. It's not right, and it contradicts the verbal support they claim for de-risking and hostile trade actions. Decoupling and de-risking, it's like those characters from Alice in Wonderland, Tweedledee and Tweedledum. They seem almost identical, but when it comes to decoupling and de-risking, they both just part of a big game that Washington plays. And Washington loves to spread false information about other countries, especially China. They want to make people believe that their power and control and of the world is necessary for peace, so they come up with terms like decoupling and de-risking to sound fancy and important. But let me tell you the truth, because it's all a long con. They want to convince everyone that America is the good guy, and anyone who doesn't follow their lead is the bad guy. They use tactics like forcing other nations to blacklist Chinese companies like Huawei and then turn around and blame China for doing the same. It's all to make themselves look like heroes. Now, I'm not saying that China is innocent, but I could say that there are no winners in war when they're going at each other. And the media plays a big role in this as well. They repeat these false stories over and over and over in newspapers and radio and TV and even on social media, and that manipulates heavily. So when you hear about decoupling and de-risking or any other fancy terms they throw around, remember that without concrete actions, it's just another cynical PR game to support their long-term agenda and their fake news. And if you like this video, watch this next video with Janet Yellen.